Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Muse on Guard. To what degree is women's health affected by food and lifestyle? Why don't we teach young girls the importance of balanced hormones? Today, I'm discussing this and more, including birth control, diets, and connection between psychological and mental well-being with Megan Murray. Megan is the owner of Beginnings Midwifery Care Center and certified holistic nutrition consultant.
I could hardly string words together, let alone try to switch gears from playing with my children and then supporting women through, pregnancy, labor, birth, having balanced cortisol levels and just supporting hormone balance in general. It really starts with before you're putting the food in your mouth, right? So we want strong digestive juices, and the way that we elicit that is by smelling food that we're cooking. That's a little bit of education about why we're choosing natural, live, and good quality foods on a holistic diet. And moving into that doesn't mean you have to clean out your pantry and go and buy all of these things. We're truly not being authentic to ourselves because we're not really honoring what our bodies need. And the flip side of that is when we do, we become quite unstoppable. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be able to have an opportunity to talk about holistic nutrition and women's health. So as you mentioned, my name's Megan. I have a background in women's health really over the last 25 years. I've been a registered midwife for 18 years. I worked as a nurse prior to that, and now I'm launching sort of a new sector of my career focusing on women's holistic health, which is really a combination of looking at nutrition, supplement recommendations, and combining that with lifestyle changes really at an expert level to help women feel their best, have balanced hormones, really focusing on gut health, digestion, and hoping to support women to feel the best in themselves and have really good energy and vitality for life.
Right, that's great, because I remember you were the first person who was stressing enough about balancing hormones during pregnancy. And it was like, you hear about hormones here and there, but you were the first one to actually talk about it as an effect on lifestyle.
And I think that my journey in this really stems from my own experience and being a woman that kind of hit that place where I had small children. I was working in my career. I was trying to do it all, was trying to, fit fitness in and eat the way that I thought I was supposed to sort of achieve that aesthetic that you're kind of talking about. And what happened really quickly is that I hit a wall and I was absolutely burnt out, where it was difficult to get out of bed. My brain fog was so intense, I could hardly string words together, let alone try to switch gears from playing with my children and then supporting women through, pregnancy, labor, birth, that sort of thing. And it was sort of a gut punch of, there's got to be a better way for this to feel better in myself, whether or not there's changes in my body composition. I just was desperate to feel more like myself again and have energy. And so that kind of took me down a rabbit hole of nutrition, because certainly we're all influenced by social media and what we see, on anytime we're scrolling. And there was a company that was really prevalent at the time that I was going through this, that was promising results in a really short amount of time with specific exercises and this very regimented eating program. And what I realized really quickly was that I was not eating enough. And although there might have been changes happening, I wasn't actually feeling any better. So that was sort of the trigger. And then over time, just sort of learning things through my work as a midwife and really learning from women and watching what women were doing and how they were feeling, and kind of comparing when we were looking at nutrition from the pregnancy perspective, because it was really easy for me to talk about things that they should be eating to promote health in their pregnancy, to make sure they're getting the right nutrients for their growing babies, to kind of compare that against eating in this regimented way. And women in pregnancy following what their bodies needed, their nutrient requirements, felt better. And so that's kind of what started me off in thinking about it differently, to try to approach it from that place of, I want to feel better. I want my thinking to be clearer. What does that all entail? So that's kind of what got me started down that rabbit hole.
So this is a really good start. And since you started talking about holistic diet, could you go more in details? What does a holistic diet actually mean to you, and specifically in the context of women's health?
Sure. Yes. So that category of holistic diet, what we're really looking at is food that is natural, alive, and good quality. And so when you are embarking on changing your life in that way, and you're switching your mindset to a holistic diet, you want to try to hit those 3 points as closely as you can. So just as an example, organic produce is a really hot thing right now. And it really is important to consider, because the pesticides and the different chemicals that are used to not only grow fruits and vegetables, but also preserve them and package them and getting them distributed around the world, they do carry a risk to us as humans. They are a sort of a form of poison, and specifically to women, they are endocrine disruptors, which means that they're going to affect our hormone balance. Which is a huge thing, a huge topic. That's really the main thing to know, is that it can absolutely affect hormone balance. And so there's ways to go about this so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So something like the organic fruits and vegetables, the Environmental Working Group puts out the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list. And so the Dirty Dozen list, these are pieces of produce that are absolutely the most laden with chemicals and pesticides and things to keep them fresh and intact in travel. And so those are the ones that you want to really aim for organic, because that title of organic means there's no pesticides being used. There's there's nothing being sprayed on them for transport. They of course don't last as long, but they're fresher. So that's, what you're looking for. And also under that category of good quality is shopping locally. So this is a really good opportunity to talk about, going to farmers markets or finding yourself a local farmer. If we switch from produce to talking about meat, okay, red meat gets a lot of press. There's lots of conversation about red meat. The key here is when we're looking at quality, is to look at a minimum grass-fed red meat or grass-fed beef, or lamb or bison, all in that category. And the reason why is because in order to call yourself a grass-fed grass-fed beef farmer, the feed that you're giving those animals also has to be free of pesticides. And so these are free range animals that are just eating what they are. They're eating what they're meant to eat, what their stomachs are designed to digest. And they're really pulling a lot of nutrition from that. And thus the meat has more nutrition compared to conventional red meat, which is farmed for, convenience and getting things moving quickly. The feed that they're giving those animals is not regulated. And so often it is also full of pesticides and chemicals to help it grow fast and desiccate more quickly. And those animals are eating that, and that's coming in the food. And therefore we're getting it through that way as well. So that's a little bit of education about why we're choosing natural, live, and good quality foods on a holistic diet. And moving into that doesn't mean you have to clean out your pantry and go and buy all of these things. You can swap things slowly. You can take your time, see how your body feels, because there are oftentimes things that we don't, it's sort of that 80-20 principle, right? So we want to achieve about 80% of that clean, natural, live, and good quality. And if there's other foods that you're eating that are the 20% that aren't upsetting your system, then of course those are something reasonable to continue to use.
Right. And I actually really like that you mentioned red meat, because I had following question a little bit further in the interview, but I guess I can ask it now. Have you noticed the trend, again on Instagram, of demonizing certain foods, so either carnivore or vegan?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? It's really fascinating. I've actually really I try to walk the talk, and I've been really experimenting with all of these different ways of eating to just see how it feels and really to make it like a visceral lived experience for myself to see how different ways of eating feel in my body. And I think that what that does for me and for me working with other women is to sort of really highlight that we have to find what works for you.
Mhm.
So like none of these things, none of these blanket ideas work for everybody. So we really have to figure out what works best in someone's body. So you're totally right. There's a few things that are consistently demonized, right? So red meat is a big one, and the tie-in with red meat is the quality, using grass-fed and grass-finished red meat versus conventional red meat, which is absolutely highly inflammatory. Like conventional red meat definitely is related to, those health diseases that we see so prevalent, like diabetes and cardiac disease, because of the conventional nature of the meat, not because of the red meat itself. Okay. Same thing with eggs. Eggs are nature's perfect food. They are the exact right balance of proteins and fats. They're a superfood for women because of the choline that support our brains and our neural function and thus our nervous system, and the high amount of protein at a fairly low calorie content that is really critical for women. They do not cause high cholesterol. You're not going to end up with clogged arteries from eating eggs. It's really a myth. They are the perfect balanced food. And again, trying to get them from pasture raised chickens will only increase the nutrient density of them versus, those sort of chicken factories where chickens are just kind of in, cages and eggs are collected, and that's kind of their purpose, right? So those ones will have less omega, 3s and 6s compared to happy free range chickens that are out ruminating on all of the different things. So, those are some of the common ones, but that argument that you bring up between vegan versus carnivore, um, there is bodies of research that sort of support both. And what I have learned and what I have seen with women that were in one camp or the other, and then we brought elements in, what it really led to was balance in their body. So in either case, and I've had clients that were very strict vegan and then they opted to move out of it and bring some animal-based products in, even something just like eggs and fish. There were big changes in how they felt and in their energy levels because they were getting a complete protein. And although you can create a complete protein by combining, grains and beans appropriately, it's a different type of bioavailability than something like red meat or eggs that have that sort of perfect combination of all the amino acid profiles and fat with it that help, our body support digestion. And equally, I have actually, spoken with a client that tried strict carnivore, which was just, I think it's referred to as the lion diet, where it's just red meat, really nothing else. And again, bringing in, switching that to the more animal-based diet, which is kind of one notch down from that carnivore, and bringing in some fruit and some carbohydrate, like starchy vegetables, particularly like sweet potato and some squash. Huge difference in energy levels, particularly, but also digestive function. So definitely improved how she felt just digesting in general around bloating and elimination. So I think the main thing is that what we're seeing on social media and how we're being influenced, it's not a one size fits all. We can't just attach to an idea or concept and think this will solve all the problems just because it worked for this person. You really do have to find what works best in your body. What do we say for our big bright green salads? And the other body of research that supports bright green salads is the high amount of fiber that's in them and the necessity of fiber in our diet, and how that raw fiber goes on to feed, the bacteria that's in our gut and kind of grow that garden in our gut. And that garden in our gut is critical to good health. It's probably like it's a pillar. If that garden is not growing well, we see all kinds of issues coming up. So again, it's kind of seeing what works best in one's own personal body and seeing how you feel, and then just adjusting, making tweaks along the way to see what the outcome is with small adjustments.
I have a question about blood sugar and cravings. I'm not sure if you remember, because, well, I guess my listeners don't know that you've been my midwife for my second pregnancy. And I mentioned after birth to my daughter that I'm just craving sugar. I could bathe in those chocolate cakes, right? So you suggested to increase my protein intake, which I did. And it really helped. Like, every time I craved chocolate, I would start eating some Greek yogurt or even just chicken and stuff like that. It really helped. But I'm wondering why people rarely ask where the issue really comes from. Why do we keep falling for sugar? Why do we keep falling for constantly snacking on it? Constantly grabbing the jar of ice cream at the store.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I really like how you have posed this question, because what I really want to say is that it's not actually your fault. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of things driving the boat with the sugar craving. So I'll tie it back into the gut health piece. So when your garden of your microbiome is off kilter, the word that we use is dysbiosis. Okay, so if we have a bacteria count that is out of balance in the gut, and let's say we have an overgrowth of something like candida, which is very common, right? That's yeast or thrush, that type of bacteria. That bacteria thrives off of sugar, and it essentially tells you that you need to be eating sugar in order to feed that bacteria. So when we look at, like you're saying, why do we continue to choose it? Well, it's not really your fault, and it's not really about willpower. It's that it's this deep, like seated craving that you actually feel like you're listening to your body. Like your body is saying, I need sugar, because those little candida bugs are like, we need sugar to grow. So you need to be eating more of that. So that's definitely one piece of it, is that the bacteria will drive what it needs to survive. And so if we rewind from that, if you are balanced in your bacteria and you have a really proliferative garden of bacteria in your gut, and your candida isn't out of whack, you won't have that sugar craving because it has what it needs. Okay, so that's one answer to that question. And then you sort of brought up blood sugar, and this is absolutely another piece of it. And this opens up the conversation around stress as well, because stress. So that stress cycle, we feel stress, and it isn't just necessarily that we're having a stressful day at work, or we're having stress in our family life, or that's certainly what it can be. But if there's even just stress within our bodies, so again, your microbiome might be a little bit out of balance. Maybe you're harboring some inflammation, or your immune system is fighting a virus right now. That is your body under duress, and your brain does not know the difference between being chased by a saber-toothed tiger creating stress in your body compared to your lymphatic system is like, holy jeepers, we got to deal with this virus that's going around. It doesn't discern, it just recognizes stress. And so when you're in that state, the trigger that happens there, that your body senses the stress and it releases cortisol to try to decrease the stress. And that mechanism tells your body to release sugar so that you have fuel to run from the saber-toothed tiger that obviously we're not running from, but your brain doesn't know that. So there's this constant supply of sugar being kicked out into your body, even if you're not eating, and even if you're managing some piece of stress in that moment. And so that constant need for sugar is also your body telling you need glucose right now. You need sugar because you are running from a saber-toothed tiger. You're dealing with something that is stressful. And it's just a nasty cycle because now you have this constant stream, you're constantly snacking, you have a constant stream of elevated blood sugar, and then we start to develop insulin resistance because it takes more and more insulin to be kicked out from the pancreas in order to settle that blood sugar. But if you're not getting rid of the stressor, your body says, no, you're wrong, insulin. We don't need you. We need this sugar constantly, in order to run from the saber-toothed tiger. So it's really not your fault, right? It's a drive in your body that makes you reach for, that bucket of ice cream. And then the other side of it, I mean, this is one piece, but the other side is good old dopamine. Sugar tastes good. We get a rush of dopamine. It's that addictive quality, and you've had it. It feels good. Now your body is saying, we need more of that because we're running from the saber-toothed tiger. It only seems logical to reach for the next snack.
Quick follow-up. So since you mentioned stress, and cortisol is the hormone of stress, correct?
That's right. Yes.
So because certain foods, especially highly processed food, and the time when we eat them can stabilize or offset cortisol and sugar, right?
Mm-hmm.
The kind of meal at the beginning of the day I can have that would actually benefit and stabilize my cortisol level.
This is such a brilliant question. I love this. So, hands down for women, the first meal of the day should happen within 45 minutes to an hour of waking up, and should include a good source of protein, aiming for at least 30 grams of protein, and a good source of fat and fiber. And when we are specifically addressing cortisol, we really need to nourish the adrenal glands so that they do not get exhausted from releasing cortisol. So we really want to focus on B vitamins and vitamin C as well. Those are sort of critical to nourishing the adrenal glands. So, and this doesn't have to be complicated. This can be really simple. I've already talked about eggs and the beauty of eggs. And it's really important, I think, to acknowledge the quantity. Like 1 or 2 eggs is not enough. You need 4 eggs or 5 eggs for breakfast. Any way you like them, really, scrambled, fried up, whatever works for you. Because each egg only has about 6 grams of protein. So if we're aiming for that 30 grams of protein, you really need 5 eggs in order to reach that 30 grams of protein and to feel full, right? We want to reach a place of feeling content and full within our bodies as well. We don't want to just eat enough to not be hungry, and then we're ready to eat again in 2 hours. That lends to that elevated blood sugar that is definitely not supportive for cortisol, right? Going about your day. So I would say 4 to 5 eggs, and even bringing in like a turkey sausage or some bacon, something, that's got a little bit of a meat source. If that sounds too complicated, how about a little bit of shaved turkey, just some clean deli meat, something like that, just to bump up that fat and protein content. Cooking it in, grass-fed butter is a great thing. Add a couple of olives, and then, have an orange with it. That's a beautiful source of vitamin C. Or if you want your eggs to be more tasty, using things like some onion and some sweet peppers. Brilliant thing to add to your eggs, packed full of vitamin C to really support and nourish your adrenal glands as well. But it should be a good sized breakfast. I think sometimes when I show people what I eat for breakfast, they're sort of like aghast, like, you eat that much food in the morning? Yes, I do. And actually, I think the part that is also important to recognize, since we're talking about setting the tone for the day and managing, having balanced cortisol levels and just supporting hormone balance in general, it really starts with before you're putting the food in your mouth, right? So we want We want strong digestive juices. And the way that we elicit that is by smelling food that we're cooking. We want to be out of that fight or flight. We want to be out of that stress response before we put the food in our mouth so that it is actually being digested and absorbed and that protein is being used. So that's as simple as taking a couple of deep breaths, like good diaphragmatic belly breaths to trigger your brain. Like, okay, we're safe. There's no saber-tooth tiger. We got this. The toddler and the baby will be okay. We can do this, just setting the stage for digestion before you even put the food in your mouth will go such a long way to supporting actually pulling the nutrition from what you're eating and keeping your hormones as balanced as possible.
Well, that's great. Sounds like somewhere out in the universe, everyone could have breakfast like that. It sounds like a lot of time. Although breakfast is my favorite part of the day, and I do try to sit down and actually enjoy it, actually have it fulfilling. However, and it's not on my list, but kind of popped up in my memory. But I've seen a lot on Instagram. People add an egg to their coffee, or they add bone broth. And again, I saw something else on Instagram. That's not where my research comes from. I did some research too, but I've seen it, and apparently it's a trend that people saying that bone broth has more of anecdotal benefit. So it comes from the stories people notice from their personal experience, but there's no scientific data on whether bone broth in the morning or next to coffee or a little bit here and there actually helps to get you throughout the day without craving too much sugar or feeling fuller.
Sure. Specific to that purpose, I would agree. There probably is not any strong body of research to support using bone broth as a tool for specifically that. So there's kind of two things I want to address here. So if we're talking about trends around, morning ritual drinks, that sort of thing, right? So one of the big things is coffee. There's a huge push right now saying, don't have coffee first thing in the morning, don't have coffee on an empty stomach. And generally, I would agree with that for women, simply because having that caffeine on an empty stomach will drive up the cortisol for sure. Like caffeine will always present a little bit of anxiety, depending on how your body processes that. There's a good chance you'll get a little cortisol spike. It's also recognizing that that isn't a bad thing. Like, we don't want to just tank cortisol all the time. Cortisol has a job in our body, and we want a little spike in the morning because that's what gets us out of bed and gives us motivation and gets us going in our day. And we want that cycle of the cortisol settling down as the day goes on so that the melatonin can come up to help us sleep at night. So having something that's caffeinated like coffee in the morning and adding bone broth or adding an egg to it certainly helps offset the cortisol caffeine piece, because we're adding a protein and a fat to it. Okay. Similar to like bulletproof coffee that came out probably a decade ago, where people were blending their coffee with butter. Same kind of thing. It's adding in a source of fat to sort of offset that nature of the caffeine, but that's really all it's doing. There's not, for that piece itself, there isn't a whole other lot of nutritional benefit. However, bone broth in itself for women is very healing, if I can use that word carefully, depending on how it's prepared, right? Because you can have bone broth that is from sort of stewed bones, roasted bones. And then there's meat broth where you have a joint that has meat on it still, or like a full chicken that you fill with filtered water and you stew fairly quickly, and you use the meat for something else, and then you kind of render the broth afterwards. And they both contain huge amounts of glycine and collagen from the bones, which that is researched up the hilt at how effective it is in supporting the digestive tract and replenishing the lining of the gut. So those are two key factors. So any woman in my experience, when I have women that their assessment shows that they have a leaky gut or a really imbalanced sort of garden of bacteria, bone broth is something that we use a lot of to help replenish that gut lining, because you just can't beat it. It works so well. And actually, as an aside, I will say I make bone broth hot chocolate all the time in my household. My children love it. It's definitely a staple in my life. And I know it sounds crazy, but for some reason it just works. It's really good. Anyhow, so that's sort of how I would answer that question, is that those things specifically, adding eggs or bone broth to your coffee, setting up your day, not necessarily, but in and of itself, that's very supportive nutritionally.
Better than the straight black coffee, right? Thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So, well, since you already sort of covered how food can affect hormones, what are some common hormonal disbalances?
When we're talking about hormone imbalances, this is a very broad category, because we tend to go to reproductive hormones. So we tend to think about your estrogen and your progesterone and your testosterone being in the right balances. And that's where our minds go to when we're thinking of hormone balance. And it's actually much broader than that. So, insulin and glucagon that manage our blood sugar, those are hormones. The thyroid stimulating hormone, how our thyroid is, how the thyroid functions is based on cortisol is a hormone. So when we're talking about balancing hormone, this is the hormones. This is a huge task, because there are so many moving parts. But specifically around women's, from menses to menopause, the intricate balance that we're always trying to maintain is between estrogen and progesterone, largely. And when we're moving into later stages of life, where we're starting to see perimenopause and then the actual date of menopause, right? So 1 year after you haven't had a period, you have now hit menopause, testosterone comes up and starts to wreak havoc when we have lower levels of testosterone. So for absolutely women in the reproductive parts of our lives, the biggest imbalance that we encounter is estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance is exactly as it sounds. You have more estrogen in your body out of balance with your level of progesterone. And it happens for many, many different reasons. In the root of it is not, it's not just one thing that causes it. So sometimes it's out of balance because you have excess estrogen, but your progesterone is normal. Sometimes it's out of balance because you have normal estrogen, but your progesterone is low. And those dominant issues are absolutely related to stress that's out of control. There are huge lifestyle implications to things like, chemical fragrances, conventional cleaning products, BPAs and plastics. These are all xenoestrogens that will attach to estrogen receptors and just wreak havoc with the balance of estrogen and progesterone. So this is actually just as an information piece about where holistic nutrition fits into this. And it provides a good example, because when we're talking about trying to figure out this hormone balance, we're looking at the nutrition piece, because absolutely to reverse an estrogen dominance, you can do it by adding nutrients that support good estrogen production and adding nutrients that support good progesterone production. Sometimes supplementation can help if we have somebody that's really depleted. But that missing piece that does not get talked about a lot is what we can do in our lives and our lifestyle to decrease estrogen and increase progesterone. And like I've just said, like the number one thing, like if your house is full of, I don't know if I should name product names, but like, Bath and Body Works candles and body sprays and things like that, those are just xenoestrogens. They are endocrine disruptors. They are basically toxic in your body, and they drive up the estrogen, and which makes the progesterone be lower. And the knock-on effect of that is all of the PMS symptoms that we suffer with as women. So dealing with heavy periods, migraines before periods, intense brain fog, intense cramping, the bloating, the like water retention, literally from your ears to your toes, that is largely due to excess estrogen. So it's important to that holistic piece is looking at all of those factors that contribute to it.
No, I was going to say that's amazing. And menstrual pain, because it wasn't just my next question, but it's, how conversation ties together. So that's another theory I've heard, and I've never heard it until a couple months ago. So very frequently, you know how women always been told, you're a woman, you're born this way, and you gotta suffer from menstrual pain. And then I hear just someone on the internet, amazing thing it is, not supposed to be. And if you're imbalanced with your health, everything, like you're trying to keep your stress low, you eating cleaner, your body is not, just walking substance of toxins, you shouldn't have any pain. Really. Because I'm okay generally during my menstrual cycle, but some of my friends, they're in bed for 2-3 days, they cancel all the plans just because of their pain. So what do you think about that? And I assume it's true that if you are completely healthy, you shouldn't be suffering from pain.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really like my passion project, friend. This is my most favorite thing to talk about and dive into, because I mean, for so many reasons. You're right. When we do health classes as young women and we're learning about what our period is, it is always presented as this burden that we have to bear, that it's awful, that we just have to grin and bear it. This is, and then the flip side of that is the ridiculous amount of satire that comes out of it, labeling women as crazy around our periods and, things like that. Right. And it's really not true. Your period is your fifth vital sign. And probably, I mean, I really think the most important way to know that you're on track with your health, like if you are having a regular period every 28 days or so, roughly within a few days, and you're only having a couple of tablespoons of flow total, it's a nice maple syrup consistency, cherry red color, not clotty, you might have a little bit of pressure in your pelvis, but certainly not dealing with migraines and cramping and things like that. You can rest assured that your garden of your microbiome is healthy, that your digestive system is firing properly, that you're producing enough stomach acid, that your thyroid is functioning well, that you're probably not insulin resistant, you're managing your blood sugars really well. And it's not an impossible place to get to. When we break it down into the 4 sort of phases of our menstrual cycle, and look at what's going on in each phase. And this is the part that gets me so excited because, I like the spin of how like women are different women throughout their menstrual cycle, right? Like we have that part of us that comes up that we get really cranky or snappy or things like that. And the reframe here is actually, yes, we have 4 different parts of ourselves that shine during our menstrual cycle, during each phase of our menstrual cycle. So just as an example, since we're talking about the period part, the bleed that you have, so the actual menstrual phase of the menstrual cycle, yes, our bodies are designed to go inwards, to relax, to be calm. It is the wintering of our bodies. We're shedding the lining, we're getting ready to start fresh. We did not conceive a baby in that cycle, and our brains are primal. Our brains are not going, oh, you're living in a busy world and doing a career and 2 kids is what you need. Our brain is like, we released an egg. Is there a baby coming? Nope. Okay, moving on to the next month, right? And so that is what we are designed to do. And our superpowers, our magic of being in our menstrual phase is that we are incredibly reflective. Our insight is different. Our creativity is of reflection and putting ideas together, which if you cycle sync, you stay in sync with your cycle, you use that to your benefit because that's your superpower at that time. And from a nutrition perspective, there are very specific nutrients that your body will thrive off of through your menstrual phase of your menstrual cycle that will support decreased bloating, support decreased cramping, all of those symptoms that we don't like. When we act, it's like medicinal. Food is medicine. We eat those things at that time and we decrease those symptoms. And it carries on through each of the other phases. Your follicular phase, it happens right after you're done your bleed. It's like your spring. So you are peppy and excitable and your brain is popping with ideas. Your creativity is outwards. That is the time when you are thinking, dreaming, designing, coming up with things. And then you move into your ovulation phase, and that is energy. Women are magnetic during their ovulation phase, right? Our bodies are telling us to go find a partner and procreate. So that's what we exude. And we have big energy to create projects. We can translate that to motherhood. We can translate that to our work, and then we move into our luteal phase. And that is like worker bee. That is like, we've got our plans. Now, this is when we execute. We are focused. We are productive. We are highly intuitive during our luteal phase. We can make decisions about things that are going on. And that's kind of the superpower. And again, adding in specific nutrients to support what's going on at those times. So in ovulation, for example, right? So the egg is released. And there is a ruptured follicle on our ovary that needs to heal fairly quickly in order to turn into the corpus luteum to start releasing progesterone to keep that estrogen and progesterone balance. So it's really important during your ovulation time, so it's a couple of days, kind of day 13 to day 17, to focus on anti-inflammatory foods, because we want to heal that corpus luteum as quickly as possible. So this is a time to really focus on, things that contain omega-3s. Salmon is a really easy one to go to. Flaxseed oil, things like that are super foods for preventing inflammation or bringing down inflammation in our bodies. Whereas we don't need to be on such an anti-inflammatory focus in the follicular phase because we are growing the lining of the uterus. So we actually want to focus on supporting estrogen. We want proliferation in our body. So, that's a time when we are, eating bright and colorful things, lots of fresh foods, things that give us, like lots of fresh fruit, things that give us good energy. Our insulin resistance is different at that time than it is in the luteal phase. I could go on and on. That it's very exciting when you learn about what it actually is, this 28-day cycle that we operate on, and how our hormones are meant to fluctuate with it. And that if you support it correctly with, I'm just going to say food and lifestyle. Supplements sometimes come in because we have women that are significantly depleted, and supplements can be very supportive. In general, we can do it with nutrition and lifestyle changes. And the proof is in the pudding. You make those changes and then your period sneaks up on you. You don't even know it's coming, and then it's here. So it's like revolutionary in my opinion. And it's certainly changed my life. And as I've taught women to get into it and try it out and apply it to their lives, they have also, like, it's sort of this disbelief, like, really, it's that simple to,
Psychologically, it it lifts up that stress you've been experiencing. How you go through self-blame on not doing enough. My kid just here needs me, or my work project is being delayed. But as soon as I found out that we're going through this cycles as women, and we actually made not to work 9 to 5, but to work our bodies. I was really relieved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you said that, because I think as women, we we walk around harboring so much guilt about what we do and haven't done, and that that hustle and that girl boss and that, getting all the things done and packing in and making memories, and it's not honoring who we are as women, and it's not honoring the, we're truly not being authentic to ourselves, because we're not really honoring what our bodies need. And the flip side of that is when we do, we become we become quite unstoppable, because if you rest when your body's telling you to rest, then the energy that you have when your body is like, here's your big energy, it's big, it's productive, and it feels like it makes sense, right? It just really, I feel like it feels very natural and authentic, and like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing for yourself,
Sure. But speaking of menstrual, I bumped into study, and I want to talk a little bit about birth control.
Mm.
Not, I guess, not too much, and not gonna touch on all these controversial theories, but here's a study I found, and I was surprised. I didn't know it was the number. That almost 1 in 5 girls aged 13 to 18 years old are on the hormonal birth control pills. I'm wondering, why is that opinion actually pushed on high school girls, and why nobody talks about the side effects of birth control pills and how they actually can affect and mess up hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a hot button topic, and I I think that there is a lot of influence from the way that healthcare is approached, certainly in North America, where we we tend to operate from a let's fix the problem rather than looking at preventative health, right? It's more um, let's make a diagnosis, and then I'm going to give you something for that to solve your problem. And we know, I know from my healthcare background, both with nursing and with midwifery, that the level of education that physicians get around nutrition and healthy lifestyle, stress management, and certainly anything that would be, in the woo-woo, right? It's minimal. Like, they might have a webinar, they might have a 1 hour conversation about it, because what they're learning is to understand pathophysiology and then how pharmaceuticals affect pathophysiology. And so I think that that's just the direct translation for them when women come in with something that appears as an issue with hormones. The birth control is the natural remedy. And the reason why is because the birth control is designed to suppress all function of hormones. So the idea is that it's taking away everything. It's suppressing all, like, the reproductive hormones, right? Suppressing progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone, and luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. So it's neutralizing everything. So you're not actually having a menstrual cycle. So, like, when girls and women are on the birth control pill and they take their 3 weeks and they have their week off, they're not actually having a menstrual cycle bleed. It's just a withdrawal because the level of hormone has dropped a little. It's kind of pretend. It was created to just mimic a 4-week cycle, but it doesn't. You could just take it continuously and it doesn't change anything in your body because it's suppressing the hormones.
That even maybe because my background is different, and let's say in Russia where I grew up, girls never talked about it in high school. We weren't even given that option. But to me, it sounds like lots of intervention into my natural side. So I would be even, stay away from it as far as possible because of that. Just because to hear, oh, you're not going to have your period, which also, can sound sure appealing, but at the same time, it's like, but then it's something's wrong with me, right? Something's wrong with my health, my cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and this is interesting hearing about your experience from Russia as well. And I had read when I was learning, kind of doing this deep dive, I'm trying to think of who the author was of a book around period health, but the beginning of her book, she talked really strongly about the way that we are taught about our menstrual cycle and having a period. And I touched on it a little bit. But I do think it really goes back to that. I think that young girls are so influenced that this is a problem, that it's a burden, that it's not important. It's, something to just deal with. And then when they have discomforts around, developing a little bit of PMS, which sometimes happens normally as their bodies are regulating, and they go to the doctor because that's the thing that you do when you have a problem, and then they just prescribe the pill, and then that becomes normal, and that's just sort of built over time, that's just what you do. And then these poor women are, been on the pill for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then they have this huge task of rewinding their body's chemistry to go back to having a normal function again. But the other side of that challenge, and I have a 14-year-old daughter who has absolutely been a guinea pig of my experimentation with different nutrients and supplements to try to support her in her developing menstrual cycle, because she would have crazy PMS symptoms that I would sort of feel like, this feels like something I dealt with, in my 30s. And it really, as soon as we changed like a simple thing, like one of the main things is magnesium. Most women are magnesium deficient. And I put her on quite a high dose of magnesium, the same that I was taking. And right away, her next cycle settled out and she had a regular cycle. So I think that if I wanted to be a visionary with this, I would love to change the education around the menstrual cycle, and for girls, in health class, and when they're learning about what it means to have 4 phases to your cycle, and the importance of acknowledging reproduction, your body's reproductive ability, insofar as being vital to your health, and teaching them how to recognize, even signs of fertility, so that even reaching for the birth control pill as a form of birth control, we can try to roll that back so that women are relying on natural fertility methods and their own intuition in their own body to avoid having to, to take that really suppressive type of medication.
So you're basically dreaming about the change in the culture and the society.
Always.
No, it starts with re-educating people, and that's probably part of what you're doing with your new project, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And so always in all of my practice in women's health in my whole career, I have always talked about alternative modalities of healing with clients, depending on what comes up. Certainly my reference is pregnancy, labor and birth, and postpartum. That's largely where my work is. And now moving into this nutrition focus. I've always incorporated it as part of my recommendation for care, depending on what women were interested in, and what they felt would benefit them. And this is always a part of making any change that's really important to acknowledge, is that if something intuitively hits you as like, this is not going to be, I don't want to do this, is not for me, I wouldn't start there, because you do, the placebo effect, right, is very real, but also you have to believe in what you're doing in order to see the change, right? Because you also need to change your mindset when you're making these types of changes in your life. But I absolutely feel like, especially being somebody that's certified in holistic nutrition, that holistic piece means that we're looking at every aspect. So while I absolutely focus on, like, nutrition is a really big part of it because it's affecting the body holistically, and I'm looking at lifestyle recommendations that essentially are supporting nutrition, it's about what we are consuming in our bodies. There is that piece, like you say, like acupuncture, massage, or brilliant examples that are also critical to making a major change in your body or ridding of toxins. There is a lovely connection to energy centers in our body. And this is sometimes where I lose people because I am talking a little bit woo-woo. Energy centers are also known as the chakras in our body. And there's just no denying that there's connections to organs with how we experience our world, right? And so something really simple, like there's a throat chakra, this energy center here. If you are somebody that's having trouble expressing, having trouble communicating, speaking your truth, that sort of thing, you will tend to have issues around the throat and around the thyroid. So I see this connection often where women have, significant thyroid issues or end up with Hashimoto's as an autoimmune disorder. And there is a connection to like childhood trauma and, situations where they aren't able to use their voice and that type of thing. And that is an important part to bring into it. And with my education and my experience in women's health, I can identify those things. I can help women acknowledge that maybe there's a relationship there, but I'm not using any sort of energy modality to help make maybe deeper changes. And that's where like acupuncture comes in beautifully. And acupuncture is all about opening up energy pathways. When we are, just as another example, say we're working on somebody's digestive system and we've been doing it for say 6 or 8 weeks and we're not really seeing a change and we're making really small adjustments. Sometimes it's that you need acupuncture again to open up the energy pathway through the digestive tract. There's some sort of blockage. There's been some sort of maybe an illness or a virus that's really closed off the energy to that organ. That's where acupuncture comes in and is really beneficial. Same can be said for something like massage, right? Where lymphatic drainage is also another big hot button topic because there's research showing that when we've got this stagnant lymph in our body, that tends to be also what's holding on to hormonal imbalances and toxins and liver exhaustion. And so while you can do your own little bit of dry brushing or lymphatic drainage on the surface, choosing nutrients that are really supporting the liver so that you're like really maximizing the liver's ability to detoxify so that lymphatic fluid is less toxic. You might actually need a series of, massage treatments to actually get stagnant stuff moving out of your body, right? So we can sort of identify that, we can tweak it and play with it. And then if that's something like a modality that speaks to a client, yeah, we want to explore that to really tie it all together.
That is amazing. That would make sense, that a healthy body is made to heal itself on its own, to a certain degree. But to get there, you actually have to do some hard work, right? But
yeah, absolutely. I think you've like wrapped it up really well. And it doesn't have to be hard forever. Like change is hard. Absolutely. If you are a busy woman and you are living under that, we call it the standard American diet, right? Where there's a lot of processed foods, a lot of packaged foods, a lot of convenience, which is not to be, this is not a punitive message by any stretch. This is a common thing that happens to us. We are doing so much. We're living our life. We're focusing on the hustle, the grind, whatever that looks like, be it in a career or in motherhood. And we just get stuck in a rut and we try to do the best that we can. Or the other scenario are the women that are not eating enough and that are, how we originally started our conversation talking about body aesthetic and are actually under eating and creating these issues because they're not getting enough fiber, they're not getting enough fat in their diet, right? Fat's critical for hormone production. There's that category of women as well. And that's a big mindset shift to say, you need to wake up in the morning and eat 5 eggs, right? Because I know people look at me like I'm insane when I say it, but it's like, try it. You will feel different, that's just one example. There's a million different breakfasts you could have that have more protein, but that's always the one that's good and shocking. But once you get into it and once you learn the how you combine the foods and how it doesn't have to be fancy. Like, I'm not making gourmet meals with, spiced vegetables and things like that. There are days when I just have really simple ground beef and a few olives and, a serving of stir fry veggies from Costco, because that way I know I've got protein, fat, and fiber on my plate. Like, I'm just putting them together. It becomes second nature because you will reap the benefits so quickly. You'll feel so much better, especially that PMS piece. And to be honest with you, weight loss does sort of happen quite organically. It is never my focus. I am not that, as a practitioner, I am not focused on weight loss for women at all, because it is an automatic byproduct of eating in this way and following your body's natural rhythms. It will just happen naturally that you'll release that energy, that extra energy on your body, because you're giving your body what it needs. So that's kind of my piece about the weight loss. But change is hard, but once you get into it and it becomes, part of your life, you're not restricted from going out to eat. You certainly can enjoy having your favorite things. But what is your favorite thing right now may not be your favorite thing anymore, because as you get into eating and combining foods specific to where you're at your menstrual cycle, you might go to eat that thing that's your favorite thing and just be like, I don't feel very good. That's not my favorite thing anymore, right? And that's also a byproduct of it. You naturally will shift out of that, and you will naturally decrease sugar cravings, because you're getting enough nutrients. So it's quite, like, I use the big word, the revolutionary. I think it just will change women's lives so much for the better.
Well, you have answered all my questions and even more.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.